Lester's show is in 3 days. We're supposed to pack up the work and drive it to the gallery. Warren and Jim had asked me to film the show, but I wanted to do the whole thing, document the process of putting it together. The packing interested me because it was a transition point for the pieces. They were out of the studio, out in the world, without the white walls and place card descriptions of a gallery. I like watching how they handled them, grabbing them by the neck, cradling them underneath their arms, then loading them in a nondescript white van. Lester was my teacher. He taught me a lot. I felt like I owed him a lot. He'd been diagnosed with cancer for over a year, went through chemo, surgery. From what people told me, he wasn't doing well. Working on the show helped him more than any medication. It gave him energy, a sense of purpose. This wasn't a retrospective, it was a whole new body of work. I couldn't help seeing the relation between the shape of the gourds and cancer growths, how his sickness was reflected in his creation. What interested me was that he had started making the work before he was sick, that it had come about unconsciously.
The gourds were found for various reasons. I mean, the most astonishing part of it was that it seemed to be a kind of a ready-made found form that seemed exactly like my drawing language. I've always kind of questioned the labor that went into work for some reason. I don't exactly know why, but I think it, like you spend a lot of time working and building and tearing down and building back up and things like that. And somehow the idea that something presents itself and seems like already given was always very provocative to me. So it was just a matter of cutting and combining and listening to, how far you could go with this particular set of gourds, or lining them up this way or that way. And their lightness allowed them to kind of like exist in space so much easier. And the interesting thing was, like, once I would get a piece and it seemed to exist, then I'd have to find out, well, where is it in space and how do I hold it up? And even though it's light, it still could fall down.
Right.
Then I had to figure out a base, and the base always has such a kind of negative history in modernism, because it seems to be like it shouldn't be necessary.
Right, it's just supporting something else.
Right, and so it's kind of like the frame to a painting.
Right.
No one frames their painting anymore, so it's kind of like it seems unnecessary, And so I had to think about that for a little bit, but what I found was that the character of the work seemed to need a support system that really had a sense of dependency to it. So the character of it really shouldn't have been independent, because there was a sense of heroics about wanting things to exist in space without support. Certain ones had the boxes in them where they would be the energy conduit, between the iron, which was the base, and then the gourd that would be the biomorphic.
Oh.
Yeah, and then Issachar, that was kind of funny. When I was in the hospital, a rabbi kept visiting me, and a Hasidic rabbi, and he wanted to pray for me, and so, but he couldn't pray for me unless he had my Jewish name, and I didn't know it. So his rabbi did research on my name and Lester, and found that Issachar was a translation. And so that was my Jewish, I found out that was my Jewish name. And it had such a romantic sense to it, Issachar. And they kind of took it, no one would have to know that,
Right.
but it still gave a sense of drama to the title, I think. Its authority as a form, I felt, was very complete, like where the two shells really mirrored each other, and they then had this kind of spherical entrance or hole that from far away you may see elliptically, kind of like just as a thin slice,
Right.
and then as you got up to it, that ellipse would then slowly open up as your gaze would become upon it. The surveillance really had to do with this sense of having a light bathe over, and especially like in the camps where you would have these searchlights that would give this enormous kind of tension, how can you get across that field? Is it going to be seen? Can you make it? Can you get to the gate? So therefore they were much more like bodies, and they were definitely bodies that were torn apart, they were marred, they were maimed, they were somewhat grotesque in some ways, and had leftover scars, etc. It wasn't any one period that I was talking about, but basically the overall humiliation or degradation of the human body and what it's gone through.
Like it's just a scar from the other.
Lester stopped by to inspect the show, to make sure everything was in the right place. He wheeled up to each piece, closely examining the lighting, shadows, how it looked against the wall, whether the sculptures were too close together. It was hard not noticing the relation of the wheelchair as his mechanical base, the clear plastic tubes coming out of two black boxes as his energy conduits, the color of his shirt, even the shape of his head reflected everything around him. Lester's work describes the most horrific of events in an elegant simplicity of form. Even the most contorted, tortured bodies have an underlying beauty. Using the gourd, he has seamlessly gone from cancer growths to bodies to sexual organs to prison camps. He has shown how a single form has such versatility and meaning, how a whole language can be created out of a few lines.
I'm my own worst enemy.
Difference in shadows, they're not the same.
I like
This has enough. Does this have enough on? Is this...
Every art student has heard the 3-second rule. That typically, the average viewer looks at a piece for about 3 seconds. Where the statistic comes from, what piece of art they gauged it off of, and who did the study, you never hear. It is an offhanded way of saying that people don't understand art, that they're lazy, that art should be made for artists. People get it, and they get it in ways we never could have imagined. I've always been fascinated by how people interact with art. They walk up to it, they look at it, they walk away. It's hard to know whether they took anything from it, whether they're thinking of how the piece fits in with their knowledge of art history, the relation of the artist to his work, or whether they should do the dishes when they get home. It's hard because it all happens in their head. Most people instantly know how they feel about a piece, but it's much harder to try and put it into words. You look at a work of art and it causes a feeling, wonder, disgust, boredom, admiration, that's then translated into a thought. It's a puzzle trying to understand it. And if it's an interesting enough puzzle, most people will take the time to try and figure it out.